All right, we are back. Thank you everyone for being patient. We are so excited to start our webinar today. My name is Jordan Davis, for those of you who are joining in now. I'm joined today by Senior Product Specialist Ian Schaefer. We're also joined on the keyboard, by our colleague Sydney Dorsey. For those of you who might be joining one of UDA's webinars for the first time, take a look at the GoToWebinar panel. There's a section there for you to submit questions to us. We're really excited to share a little bit of a different webinar than our normal overviews of our software and our products. What we found is that we've had some really great questions come into the webinars as we've done, because this is the third webinar in the series of our tips and tricks just in time for Halloween, for those of you that are keeping track. But go ahead and send in to us a little bit about yourselves, what you are hoping to learn from the webinar today. Tell us a little bit about what your company does. We would love to get to know you and really craft some of the things that we're sharing today in this webinar around some of the questions that you have. Now, of course, today's webinar, we do have 5 actionable tips that I'm really excited to cover with you. But before we really dive into those, Ian, tell us a little bit about UDA Technologies, especially for those who are joining in maybe for the first time, who have come across us and are interested to learn a little bit about our company and ConstructionSuite.
Yeah, thanks, Jordan, and I'm happy to. So UDA Technologies, as a software provider, we have been providing solutions for close to 20 years at this point. UDA Technologies was actually originally developed by our owner, Michael Stevens, who had a construction company that he developed shortly after he graduated in architecture from Auburn University many moons ago. I won't tell you exactly how many, because he'd be a little upset with me if I did. But he started this construction company, United Design, many years ago, and what he found was the construction process was probably the most valuable component to all of the work that he did. He actually started selling some of the custom home plans, the floor plans that they did, and all the people who purchased these plans would come back to him and ask him how he was able to build these homes in such a short amount of time and under budget in almost all cases. So he started to see the opportunity there. That actually was packaged originally as our first set of software, Construction Office, back in the late 90s. It started to grow exponentially and became ConstructionSuite back in 2006. That's when we first started releasing this software that we're taking a look at today. In 2009, we saw a huge opportunity for web-based platforms and tools. ConstructionOnline was developed to feed that need. A lot of our customers came to us needing portals, needing access from the field, needing mobile apps. All of this information is packaged together in ConstructionOnline, and all of that allows our team to cater to well over 500,000 users at this point, and we find that our UDA teams, our users, are managing over $80 billion in projects daily now. And how they do that is with some of these great tools that we're going to be taking a look at today. Jordan has mentioned that we're going to be covering scheduling. This is going to be the desktop on-plan scheduling software. This is part of our developed suite of software, ConstructionSuite, and we're going to be going over, again, 5 of the highest or most underutilized tips and tricks available within the scheduling system. And at this point, we'll hand it off to you, Jordan. Let's dive into how we can get these jobs done on time, or maybe even a little early, and how we can make these jobs more profitable as a result.
Yeah, so today's webinar is really going to be focused on, as I mentioned before, very actionable tools that are actually built into OnPlan. Now, as Ian mentioned, I'm going to go ahead and pull up a schedule here. We're looking at the scheduling suite of tools inside of ConstructionSuite. The schedule itself, some of you might be familiar with it already, but if you take a look, it's a fully fledged Gantt chart scheduling software. Now, there are a lot of basic actions that you can do just looking at a schedule here, but as you can see, we have already built out some content today. That way you don't have to wait for us to actually jump in and start putting some of these things together. Now, the name of the game when you're putting together any type of schedule, or at least in our software, is efficiency. So these first 2 items we're going to focus on are really geared towards taking the work that you do and really adding a lot of efficiency to that. So the first piece that I want to start with, or the first tip, is looking at the Sequential predecessors tool here inside of ConstructionSuite. So many of you are probably familiar with what we're looking at here. We're looking at these different tasks on the Gantt chart, and they're connected by predecessors, which are going to allow our schedules to be more dynamic. So for instance, if this task number 2 here is delayed, it moves the schedule forward. You can see it's pretty simple to actually assign predecessors to tasks inside of a schedule. You would just go in here and say, this liability insurance task here, it's going to follow through here in builder's risk insurance. Keep in mind, we're really just showing off tips and tricks here, so the logic behind this might apply, might not, but really, we could go through and we could start typing in all of these different tasks here, but we could also really speed up this process. It's fairly straightforward. If you have a series of tasks inside of your schedule that you need to chain together to make sure that they're going to follow through, all you have to do is select the different tasks. And the way that I did that was I just picked this first task here, held down the shift key and clicked, and then we just set sequential predecessors. Now, this is going to really come into play as you are building out your own schedules. So instead of just going through and typing in all of the different predecessors, you can take care of all of this work in one fell swoop. Really, really helps you accelerate putting together the schedules as you're working through. So, tip number 1, set sequential predecessors. Now, for some context, Ian, I really was just showing off the functionality here. Where do you see this coming into play for our clients and our ConstructionSuite users? Where is this really going to have a big impact on building out their schedules?
Well, that's such a great question, too, because I see the sequential predecessor idea used all the time, but not necessarily using the button itself. We're actually in an area where it may come into play. We've got a lot of material deliveries that are all happening around framing here as an example, and I may not have the space or the desire to have all the materials show up on site at the same time. Now, of course, certain suppliers are going to handle things in different ways, but if I have my option, I would definitely want to scatter these things out a little bit so that we get the materials that we need when we need them, instead of getting the materials whenever the supplier decides to dump them off on us. This is one of those areas where separating out all those material deliveries then allows us to sequentially chain this information together so that we get the materials that we need for day 1 on day 1. A few days later, perhaps we drag that task out a little bit as we're using them. We get the next delivery, and again, it happens in sequence. I need them in order. That option, this trick that you're providing for us here, which is a treat as well, it gives us that option to scatter those tasks and provide that. I find that it also helps a lot later on when we start to get into the individual trades. We can break down the electrician's work. He's doing lighting one day. He's doing the next day. He's going to be on site again, but maybe he's doing outlets. And then the following day, maybe he's doing light switches. Whatever it may be, we can sequence those as well. He's going to be here the whole week or longer, but we can scatter out his tasks so that we can give him some information there to work with.
Great. Thanks so much for the insight, Ian. I actually see a question has just come in. I don't want to address it now because it's actually pretty interesting. It's actually going to move into tip number 2, where we're going to be discussing assigning resources to tasks. If you, as Ian was mentioning, if you kind of picked up on it a bit, we have a way for you to actually go in and set different people, different suppliers or vendors or subcontractors onto the tasks here in the schedule. And so, as you might be aware, you can easily access and then add in a resource here. Now, this is pulling from ConstructionSuite's contacts database. So we've put together these contacts beforehand, and there's a way to go in and add them in. But when you're adding in a different contact as a resource, it might seem at first to be a little time-consuming. But we've built in a fairly simple way to actually go in and mass assign resources to different tasks. So, going back to your example here, Ian, let's say that we have some subcontractors coming in. We've subcontracted them to actually come in and do some of the work here. So we're going to go in and pick out a few different items here. It doesn't really matter too much what we're working on, because it's really the important part is that you're going to take this step and you're going to be able to apply it to your schedules. Now, if you look, it was fairly simple. I just selected a few different tasks, and just like before, I just right-clicked and decided to assign a resource, except now you can see I'm editing multiple tasks. So we're going to go ahead and jump back in here, and we're just going to go ahead and assign our resource. Now, the question that came in is actually addressing something that we're looking at here. Now, we're not going to go into too much detail, but there is an internal database that's tracking this contact throughout all of our different schedules. So let's say we were working to mass assign this resource to a few different tasks in the schedule. As we're assigning this resource, any other days that they're assigned to actually work on different schedules is actually going to show up here in the resource window. So it helps us really identify, do we have a scheduled conflict? Is there something that we need to address here? But going back to where we were before, it's actually fairly simple. Now we have assigned Baker Power in to do some of this work. Maybe they're not actually going to be doing this work specifically, but for our purposes, it takes the job of assigning resources in the schedule and really trims down a lot of the work that you would need to do inside the schedules.
Yeah, and taking that back to some of the work that we were talking about before, when we are going through and assigning the electrician to all the different tasks that the electrician might work on, again, we're able to go through and assign that one resource, my electrician for this job, to several tasks at once, which then allows us to save a lot of the effort investment that we're putting into the system. One click, or a small handful of clicks in this case, is going to allow us to apply these updates across several different areas. Now, it could be individual tasks. Again, what Jordan is doing to select multiple tasks here would be selecting the first and then holding down the control key maybe to select the next few. This allows him to select a bunch of individual tasks and applying those resources throughout the set. Alternatively, you can actually hold down the shift key after selecting the first task, pick the first, hold shift, and click the last in, again, a sequence of tasks. Mm-hmm. So maybe after we set sequential predecessors, now you can also right-click on the same group and assign the resource to all the tasks in that group. Now, of course, this allows us to define the start for a lot of the schedule information. This is us planning ahead, and we're trying to set up the flow and everything like that. Of course, the magic section now is going to be execution, which, Jordan, why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the next phase that we're moving into, the different tips that we're going to be covering next, are actually all about executing on these schedules well. So we have done our due diligence. We've really tried to line up the perfect schedule. And of course, everything is going to stay right on time. There's not going to be any changes with this beautiful plan that we have set up to build out this new construction that's coming up from the ground, right? Absolutely not. Everyone knows that there are unforeseen events that come up on any project. Doesn't matter the industry, doesn't matter the area of the country that you're in, really doesn't matter in the area of the world that you're in. You can't control the weather. If you can, let us know, we'll sign up. But what we really are going to focus on next is keeping track of your schedules and how they're actually performing, how your team's performing, how the people that you have decided to work with are performing, and really to start putting together some information for your company to help you improve over time. So to start, we need to find out a way to track any changes in the schedule, and we need it to be easy, and we need it to be apparent. And we have exactly the tool for that inside of baselines. So we're actually going to go into and set a baseline for this schedule. Now you can think of the baseline as a carbon copy of this schedule as it stands at the instant that we create the baseline. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you where the schedule is. I'm going to go ahead and set a baseline. Now you can see ConstructionSuite is going to track the date and time that you created this schedule, and we're going to call this something descriptive for ourselves and other people on our team to identify and understand. So this is going to be maybe initial schedule. Simple enough. So we've gone ahead and set the baseline for the schedule. Now, you don't really see anything yet. But let's say that something comes up, and for whatever reason, something has happened, and our first real initial task here that is going to move is site work. Let's say for whatever reason that gets delayed by a week. Now, what we can see is the schedule as it stands now and the baseline of the schedule, where the tasks were. So we can already see that we have lost a week across the board. Now, this is a fantastic way for you to track schedule efficiency and really so to give you an idea of what you need to do to get back on track. It's a very visually apparent, it's a very useful tool built inside of ConstructionSuite. And I'll tell you, Ian, the clients that I've worked with, the ones who are in the know about baselines and use them religiously. The ones that haven't ever really seen the baseline options before, when they do learn about them, start incorporating them into their workflows and their use of ConstructionSuite immediately. So that was a pretty standard overview. It's very easy to go ahead and set this baseline here. Well, it's actually much easier to actually set a shortcut so that you don't forget to come into this menu here and show you another mini tip. This one is a freebie. You just can right click on the icon and then add it to your quick access toolbar. This can come into play later on in other schedules that you're working on, so on and so forth. Now, before we move on from this tip though, Ian, do you have anything else to share, any other insights on how we can use baselines effectively for our companies and our schedules?
Well, communication is actually the first thing that comes to my mind. There are a lot of misunderstandings on how seemingly simple delays could impact a schedule as a whole, and I find that these types of visuals that you get using things like baselines or providing this kind of a flow will help answer those questions quite quickly. The biggest thing that I find that leads to delays like this, aside from weather of course, for me has always been customers. Our clients' selections and their diligence in meeting the deadlines for those selections can of course become kind of problematic sometimes, but what I find is the biggest hurdle in that case is they don't understand why it's so important to meet that deadline. Now in this case, if we miss the deadline again for a selection by a week, and it does end up causing delays for something like that, you can provide this as a visual to the customer so that they understand how much of an impact that has. So again, I love this sort of tool because it allows us to communicate with pictures or with images or visuals instead of relying on sometimes our understanding or lack thereof to provide that additional insight to our customers.
Yeah, and I kind of want to touch on a question here that came in from one of our webinar attendees. They asked, how does this baseline show how to get the schedule back on track? Well, it's kind of a tricky answer. It can show you where the schedule has gotten off track. Now, as far as how to get the schedule back on track, it can give you some targets to try and meet or even exceed. Something that our company owner has shared with us is that when you're working with a schedule, if the more cushion that you build into your schedule where it can, it tends to creep up on you and starts to creep out into your schedules. So if you're looking at something like this and you do have a delay impact your schedule, maybe you work with your team, or maybe you address the schedule and see where there are some areas that you can start to trim back a bit. So it's one of those answers is that it doesn't really show you how, but it does give you some quick insights into maybe where to focus your efforts and really to where to fight the battles that you're most likely to win.
Yeah, and I would add to that too, in order to identify a problem that you guys are working on, you have to be able to see it. You have to have something that helps bring to light that there is something that we need to work on. So the question of how does this help us get back on schedule, well, the very first thing that it does is it highlights that we're not going to be on schedule if we continue as we go. That, for me, has always been step one. So now that this baseline is identifying to us where our tasks have come off track, we have this excellent tool that allows us to come back in and find the right the right course. You'll also find that Jordan is kind of navigating his way to a baseline schedule report as well. This takes advantage of the fact that we've set this baseline, and it identifies how far we've slipped in that schedule and which tasks we need to focus on. If you actually look through a baseline report, and we don't need to generate one right now, but if you look through that report, it'll actually start to show you where that small delay becomes a humongous delay because we start to hit holidays. This schedule is a great one as an example because we start to skip over Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's and all these other periods in time that may not have impacted the schedule initially. But now that we're hitting this, you can start to see these tasks drag out over holidays. And again, more and more apparent, it's showing you where there are problems and giving you the opportunity to go in there and take action, which could mean that maybe we need to work some Saturdays to make up that time. Or maybe we just need to sit down and have a conversation with the customer and notify them that these things are going to be there. That communication, again, is key.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of communication and really focusing on ways to make ConstructionSuite work for you, the next tip number 4, is going to be setting up task reminders. It's actually fairly simple to find inside of ConstructionSuite. But you can do some very interesting things with task reminders. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Framing Inspection here, and I'm going to navigate over to the Reminders tab. Like I was saying, it's a fairly simple system from the outset, but you can do some very interesting things with the task reminder system. So you can see when you add a new reminder, ConstructionSuite will go ahead and populate some basic information for you to work with so that you don't have to start from scratch. Gives you a little bit of a head start here. But when you're looking through this information, you can see there's some interesting fields that you can use and some interesting ways to manipulate the information that is sent out. I was talking with a client a few days ago actually about setting up different reminders in their schedule to let them know when they're coming up on, say, the last 20% of their project. And so they were, I'm not going to give the name because maybe it turns into something that will key off, but they really wanted to give themselves a nudge on where they should be focusing, because from what we can tell, our clients are incredibly successful, or they're aiming to be incredibly successful. So you're not just going to be managing one project at a time, right? The reminder system inside of ConstructionSuite schedules will give you and your team and the people that you're working with nudges and helpful messages along the way to let them know when and where they should really be focusing their attention at any given time.
And I would add to that too that these reminders that ConstructionSuite has the ability to send out based on these triggers, they have a lot of added functionality. Like as we're navigating through these additional tabs, you'll see that the reminders can be sent out via email, which is the default, or for those of you who are Total Care subscribers, you'll also have the option to send out text message reminders as well, or the SMS. Now each of these activities will have its own collection of reminders associated with them. Planning reminders are typically defaulted to about 10 days in advance, starting about 2 days, and custom reminders the day before. But the idea with a lot of these is we want to get people to this job site when they're supposed to be there. And if we go back and take a look at the reminder message itself, you can customize these messages easily to say where they're supposed to be, when they're supposed to be there. And what you find with these auto-populating fields, the subject, the project, the contacts, they're not filled in right now because they're going to fill themselves in when the activity goes live. Now, the delays that we've put into the schedule themselves are the reason we don't want to try to pre-populate that. Rather than coming in and re-entering that information or updating our reminder messages every single time we make a small change to the schedule, we can leave these fields in, the subject, the project, the contact, the start, and they'll just update as soon as the email or the text message is ready to send. Again, less work for us, more automation in the system. And in this case, automation is a great thing.
Yeah, automation can really help you execute across the board. Now, speaking of executing across the board, the final tip that we're going to bring your attention to today really is kind of a culmination or a combination of everything that we've looked at. After you have really increased your efficiency and you're executing well on your schedules, well, it's time to look forward to the future. It's time to take what you've learned and the improvements that you've made to your own processes. It's time to take a schedule that has worked especially well for you and do more with it. It's time to take it and really actually apply the lessons that you've learned. And what we have found as a company is that the best way to do that is to build off of the success of your current work. Because really, if you're starting from scratch every single time for every single thing that you do, you're constantly having to reinvest the effort, reinvest the energy into what you're doing just to get anywhere close to where you were before. So we've made it very easy to take a successful schedule and to actually turn it into the base for the next planning phase of your project, for the next schedule that you build out. And really, I cannot highlight the value enough of taking something that you have spent a lot of time and effort on building out and turning it into a template. So it's very simple to do so. And once you actually create a schedule template, then we can take all of that structure, all of the pieces that we built out, and then reuse that for different projects. I can already feel some of our webinar viewers now kind of like screeching, grinding to a halt, and thinking, this is not the right way to handle this. Why would I turn my schedule into a template? I do the most custom of custom work imaginable. There is no way that the work that I do can be turned into some type of mass-produced template that's just going to be spun out over and over again. And, we have so much experience to counter that. For all the clients that we've worked with, that is absolutely not the case whatsoever. So if you're thinking about that, really, that is just not what we found over time.
Yeah, and what we've discovered is a lot of people invest time in putting their schedules together, and that time is usually invested by putting together some of the reminder messages, perhaps, maybe developing the predecessor relationships and updating them as we find that they're not quite perfect. And even for the custom builders, the process that you go through in building the job is typically similar. Now, it's not going to be exact. We don't expect it to be exact. In the very least, you're going to find that it's not starting at the same time. Not everything takes the same amount of time. There's small adjustments. We would argue, though, in this case, that setting up your schedule template saves you all the time of creating the predecessors and the connections, and therefore all you have to do is go through and make small adjustments, and you end up with a more successful, repeatable process. For me, it's almost like the workflows that we talked about 2 weeks ago in our webinar on the ConstructionSuite tips and tricks. Excellent tools to provide that repeatable process and guideline for everybody, and then we can just go through and adjust it ever so slightly when we need to. You'll also find that there's some added options like shifting the project start date or syncing with an estimate so that we can start to get a cash flow out of this. All of these additional tools are still available as we work with this schedule template on new projects. It just allows us to more personalize it or customize it to fit the new job that we're working on today.
Absolutely. So we've reached the fifth tip out of our 5 tips and tricks. I am seeing a good number of questions coming in, so we have a bit of time to spend now. We would love to take a look at some of the questions that you submit. If the questions end up becoming a little bit company specific, we would be more than happy to speak with you after the webinar, but don't let that discourage you from submitting your questions. The most enjoyable part of the webinars that we have done for the past few weeks, and Ian, I'm sure you will agree with this, have absolutely been the question and the questions segment. The questions that have come in have been fantastic. We're really excited to see, if you do have some questions. So we're going to take a moment now to direct our attention towards your questions.
And one of the first pairs of questions that I've seen, apparently some of you guys are having similar thoughts or the same kind of thoughts here. The questions kind of lead back to the baselines that we were talking about before. How can we, using those baselines, indicate or note what type of issue caused the delays themselves? Now, there's a number of different ways to tackle that particular topic, but I found two lead to the best of successes. The first one, of course, is when you're setting the baseline itself. It gives you the ability to set a title for that baseline. I personally prefer using the title bar as the indicator for delays. Maybe this is after, Jordan had the initial start as one of our baselines. We've put the schedule together, we haven't made any changes yet, we have our initial start. So then we might make some delays, and this next baseline that we create might be after Hurricane Hugo. So Hurricane Hugo has come through. We adjust everything after that baseline so that we can see the difference of pre-hurricane, post-hurricane. However you need to set that up. Then the next one might be client selection or clients missed selection deadlines. And then we go through and adjust all the tasks, and now we have pre-selection deadline, post-selection deadline. Something along those lines gives you the ability to look through those. This is also really beneficial because then when you're looking through your list under show baselines, you can see all the different titles and how they apply. Post-selection deadlines, post-hurricane, post-whatever it may be. All of that information is available there, and you can start to go in there and kind of cherry pick. Now, I said that there were two options. The second place that I usually recommend going in there and doing it is the delayed task itself. If you click onto any of these tasks, you can right-click and go into the information details, or over on the far left-hand side, you might see some notepads. If you go into the task information, you'll find a variety of different task notes available to you there as well. Now go ahead and open up the task information for us real quick. In this task information field, under notes, you'll actually find two different sets, thinking of estimates there. The two sets that we have here are task notes and field notes. You can actually go into either of these areas, put in the cause of the delay, insert a timestamp, which would be you claiming responsibility or saying it was us, it was them, I'm putting in my note, whoever it is, whatever you need to do. But you can put in these details to explain why the task was delayed, and then the impact, of course, that follows. To report off of this, you can save your notes, go to the Reports tab, and there are actually note reports that you can generate from here as well. So again, from here, as you're working through this, the status reports will provide some detail. The list notes reports or the task or field notes reports will provide that additional detail. And some of the information can just come back through into the other reports as well. A lot of them have the option to pull the notes. Take advantage of it if you need it. So again, it's a great solution there for tracking what those delays are. You can even go into some of these areas and attach documents like maybe a daily log report from ConstructionOnline if you generate one. So that could be run as a PDF, and then you could actually save that and attach it to one of the tasks in ConstructionSuite as well if you want to track the additional detail. So great question there. Obviously it was an important one. We had several people who were coming up with that. Looks like we actually have another one there as well that adds something similar. So again, good topic to have there.
I saw a question that came in earlier about adjusting different workdays or custom holidays inside of schedules. So you can see right now the way that we have the schedule set, any days that are not work days are kind of grayed out somewhat. And you can see, of course, Thanksgiving is here. Now, maybe Thanksgiving doesn't quite apply, but maybe we don't have to go in that direction. Maybe we just need to navigate in and say, well, in order to get the schedule back on track, we're going to have to work on Saturdays. It's actually really easy. I don't know if you saw where I went. I just went to set work days, taking a look at the work days and holidays menu here. For this schedule, maybe we're going to have to start working on Saturdays. Or maybe, that's already part of the way that your company does business. It's actually very, very easy to go in and adjust this. Also, note the exceptions options here. You can actually go in and set custom exceptions to the general workdays and holidays fields here. So maybe you work Saturdays except for certain dates, or maybe in the reverse. Maybe there are some Saturdays that you're going to have to get the schedule back on track. You can just go in and add in specific days for the schedule system itself to consider when it is making the adjustments for you as predecessors are adjusted, and so on and so forth.
This is actually an interesting one as well because we've had several clients who need to put in custom holidays. One particular that pops to my mind was one of our clients who was working on a remodeling project for a Jewish client. So the very first thing that our ConstructionSuite scheduler did was they went in and they started setting up non-work days for all the Jewish holidays so that they wouldn't interrupt their customer. Now their customer was so appreciative that that consideration was brought in. There was no requests. We didn't have to talk about it or anything like that. Our user, the person using the scheduling system, just knew to do this. As a result, they went back, talked to all of their friends and family members. That became a new lead source for our customer simply because they went in and provided the consideration of avoiding those custom holidays for our client's Jewish client. It was a very easy process and turned into an additional revenue source that brought in about $7 million over the next few years. So very, very worthwhile. And it's an easy thing, like he said, to just go in there and add those in. Now, I actually saw another question in here that referenced some of the view that we have right now on the Gantt chart itself. In case you guys haven't seen it yet, I direct your attention to the Gantt chart where you can see some of the IDs, task names, and dollar amounts that are corresponding with a lot of these scheduled tasks. For example, foundation materials right now, task number 12, over on the Gantt chart, you can see that task is worth $8,000. That's how much money maybe we're going to be spending on this. Now there's two parts to this dollar amount. The question itself was asked, can we turn those off? Which, yes, the answer is yes, you can. Just go up to the Show Hide Columns button in the View menu. Click on that and you'll actually see over on the right side where you can show or hide additional pieces of information in the Gantt chart. This is really handy if you want to turn off the estimate dollar amounts from the schedule itself. You can go down and find total estimate, uncheck the box, and they'll be hidden. Again, beneficial, especially if you wanted to send a copy to your client or print it out to hang on the job site. We don't need the dollars to show for everybody, so we can limit that information and go from there. Now, the other humongous benefit that I'm a huge fan of, being a numbers guy, an accounting person, under the Reports menu in the ConstructionSuite scheduling tool here on Plan, there's also an option to generate a cash flow report. Now, because we generated this schedule from an estimate and the dollars are in there, we can actually run a report that shows us how much money we're spending and how often we need to account for that. I love this. What makes it even better, though, is there is an option here to run the report for all projects that we have going over a given time period. So if I wanted to see the cash flow for the rest of the year, we could just come in and filter the report by date, run the report for everything between now and December 31st, and this will show us our cash flow for the next two months and a week. So again, spectacular tool for planning ahead, and these reports that are being generated from here, they're all fundamentally based on this idea that the schedule and the estimate work together to our benefit to provide better insight on how the company is going to be operating for the next few months. Or forever, really. For that matter, applies all over the place. Again, great questions, guys. Keep them coming, please.
Yeah, we'll give it just a few more minutes as we are waiting. Thank you all so much for joining in on our webinar today. We really can't tell you how much we appreciate all of our attendees, our current clients that are attending, those of you who are hoping to learn more about ConstructionSuite. Really, I hope that as we start to wrap up here, that you take away a few different action items that you can look to start incorporating into your own processes, into your own companies, and the way that you work together as a team, and the way that ConstructionSuite can really give you a lot more efficiency across the things that you're already doing. Hopefully we kind of revealed some things inside of ConstructionSuite's scheduling tools that you didn't really know about before.
Looks like we've actually got a few more questions about general functionality in the schedules as well. We are unfortunately about out of time today. We had to keep this one a little close, but one thing that I would recommend, if you guys haven't caught them already, we've done a few webinars recently covering things like how to build a schedule, how to align schedules or connect them together, how to find multiple resources spanning multiple jobs, or cash flow reports was one that just came in again. All of these are going to be summarized in some of our past webinars, all of which have been recorded, just like this one is, and they're all available on our YouTube channel. You guys can find us on YouTube by going to youtube.com and search for UDA Technologies, all one word. When you get there, you'll actually find our channel, which includes, at this point, probably 200 different videos, some of which are very short and brief, maybe 2 or 3 minute videos. We did a 2-minute drill on there once. You'll find others that are a little bit longer, like this webinar, for example. They have a wide variety of tools and tricks and tips and training purposes, and some are just basic introductions. Some might be for your client so that you can show off something like the customer portal app or some of the contracts or reports. But ultimately, it's a fantastic tool for going there and providing some additional learning resources. And if you haven't taken a look at it yet, you really, really should. There's a ton of great resources on there, and I'd love for you guys to have a chance to go in and take a look. Now, as I mentioned, we are about out of time today. So I really appreciate all of you guys joining us. It's been a pleasure taking you guys through on-plan scheduling and some of the tips and tricks that we have available for you here. If you do have follow-up questions and you'd like to reach out to us at any point, take a look at your ConstructionSuite software. Under the Help menu, you will find contact information with a variety of different phone numbers and email addresses and additional ways of contacting us across all of our near 80 different countries that we cover. So if you guys are interested, by all means, reach out, let us know, give us some idea on what you guys are thinking, and we're happy to help. Until then, though, until we hear from you guys again, I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you again so much for joining us, and hopefully we'll have a chance to talk to you guys again very soon. Thanks, and have a great weekend.